The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty saloon in Abilene, Kansas, and Catherine Brennan stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk with nothing but the dress on her back and $12 hidden in her boot. It was June of 1872, and the summer heat pressed down on the cattle town like a heavy blanket, making the air shimmer above the dirt streets where cowboys drove longhorns toward the railhead. Catherine's hands trembled as she smoothed her travel-worn skirts, trying to maintain some dignity even as her world crumbled around her like sun-baked clay. She had left St. Louis 3 days ago, fleeing from the wreckage of her marriage to Richard Brennan, a man who had promised her the world and delivered nothing but debt and humiliation. The creditors had taken their fine house on Locust Street, the furniture her mother had given them, even the silver hairbrush that had belonged to Catherine's grandmother. Richard had vanished 2 weeks before the bailiffs came, taking with him every cent from their accounts and the deed to a cattle ranch in Texas that Catherine had inherited from her uncle. The lawyers said she had no recourse since married women had no property rights separate from their husbands. Richard had simply taken everything that was hers and made it disappear along with himself. Catherine stood on that boardwalk, watching cattle being herded past, listening to the shouts of drovers and the lowing of steers, and felt more alone than she had ever felt in her 24 years. She had come to Abilene because it was far from St. Louis and because she had heard that jobs existed here for women willing to work hard. She needed employment, needed shelter, needed to rebuild a life from absolutely nothing. The saloon doors swung open and a tall man stepped out, nearly colliding with her. He was lean and weathered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of the Kansas sky before a storm. Dust covered his boots and the bottom of his canvas pants, and he wore a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. A gun belt sat low on his hips, the holster tied down in the manner of a man who knew how to use it. "Pardon me, ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was deep and had the unhurried quality of someone who spent most of his time under open sky rather than in crowded cities. He started to move past her, then paused, looking at her more closely. "You all right? You look about ready to collapse in this heat." Catherine wanted to tell him she was fine, that she needed no assistance, but the truth was that she had barely eaten since leaving St. Louis and the heat was making her dizzy. She swayed slightly, and the cowboy caught her elbow with a gentle grip. "When did you last have a proper meal?" he asked, his brow furrowing with concern. "Yesterday morning," Catherine admitted, too tired to lie. "I have money, just not very much of it." The cowboy guided her toward the door of the saloon. "Come on, you need to sit down and eat something before you faint dead away in the street." Inside, the saloon was dimmer and slightly cooler. The cowboy led her to a table away from the bar where men were drinking and playing cards. He pulled out a chair for her and then sat down across from her, signaling the barkeep. "Bring us 2 plates of whatever Molly cooked today and water," he called out. Then he turned his attention back to Catherine. "Name's Jack Hollister. I work cattle mostly, drive them up from Texas when the season's right." "Catherine Brennan," she replied, and something in her voice must have conveyed her bitterness because Jack's expression shifted to one of careful attention. "You running from something, Mrs. Brennan?" he asked quietly. "Or is it Miss?" "Mrs.," Catherine said, the word tasting like ashes in her mouth. "Though I wish it were not so. My husband left me with nothing. Took everything I owned, everything I inherited, and disappeared. The law says I have no claim to any of it because it all became his property when we married. So here I am in Abilene, with $12 and no prospects." She had not intended to spill her troubles to a complete stranger, but something about Jack Hollister's steady gaze and the genuine concern in his eyes made the words tumble out. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening as she described how Richard had stripped her of everything and left her to face the creditors alone. The food arrived, thick beef stew with potatoes and carrots and bread that was still warm. Catherine had not realized how hungry she was until the smell reached her, and she ate with an eagerness that would have embarrassed her under other circumstances. Jack ate too, but he watched her between bites, something working behind his eyes like he was turning over a problem in his mind. "I got a ranch," he said finally, setting down his spoon. "It is not much yet, but it is mine, free and clear, about 10 miles north of here, good water and decent grazing. I have been working it alone for 2 years now, building it up slow. It is hard work for one person and I could use help. If you are looking for a place to start over, you could work for me. I would pay you fair wages, and there is a small cabin on the property where you could stay. Nothing improper," he added quickly. "I sleep in the barn most nights anyway, prefer it that way." Catherine stared at him, searching for the trick, the angle, the hidden price that would come due later. She had trusted Richard, and look where that had led her. But Jack Hollister's face showed nothing but honest concern and a straightforward offer of employment. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You do not even know me." Jack leaned back in his chair, considering his words. "My mother was in a situation like yours once, long time ago. My father drank away everything they had and then died in a brawl, leaving her with 3 children and debts she had not incurred. Nobody would help her because she was a woman alone, and people assumed the worst. We nearly starved before my uncle finally took us in. I remember what it was like to watch her struggle with no one willing to give her a chance. I swore then that if I ever had the means, I would help someone in that situation. So here we are. You need work, I need help. Seems straightforward to me." Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had cried enough over Richard Brennan and would not waste more tears. "What kind of work?" she asked. "Cooking, mending, helping with the horses and cattle when needed. I got about 50 head right now, planning to build the herd up over the next few years. Garden needs tending, chickens need feeding. Ranch work, basically. It is hard, I will not lie about that. But it is honest, and you would be earning your own way." Catherine thought about her options, which were precious few. She could try to find work in Abilene, but most jobs for women in cattle towns were either in saloons or as domestics in private homes, and she had no references for the latter. She could try to make her way further west, but that would eat up her small reserve of money with no guarantee of finding anything better. Or she could take a chance on this stranger who looked at her with kind eyes and offered her a lifeline when she was drowning. "Then start over here with me," Jack said softly, as if reading her thoughts. "Build something new. You lost everything, but that means you are free to create whatever life you want now, no man controlling your choices, no one taking what you earn. Just honest work and a fresh beginning." Catherine met his eyes and saw no deception there, only a quiet strength and an earnestness that made her want to believe him. "All right," she said. "I will work for you, Mr. Hollister, and I will earn my keep, I promise you that." "Jack," he corrected with a small smile. "No need for formality when we will be working together every day. Finish your food, and we will get you some supplies before we head out to the ranch. You are going to need boots and work clothes, cannot tend cattle in a city dress." They spent the rest of the afternoon in Abilene's general store, where Jack insisted on buying her 2 sets of sturdy work clothes, boots that actually fit, a wide-brimmed hat to protect her from the sun, and various other necessities. Catherine protested the expense, but Jack waved off her concerns. "Consider it an advance on your wages," he said. "You cannot work if you are not properly outfitted. Besides, I have been saving up for 2 years with no one to spend it on but myself and the horses. About time some of it went to a good cause." By late afternoon, they were riding north from Abilene in Jack's wagon, Catherine sitting beside him on the bench seat as the prairie stretched out around them in endless waves of tall grass. The sky was huge and blue, dotted with white clouds that cast moving shadows across the land. Catherine had spent her whole life in cities, first in Philadelphia where she was born, then in St. Louis after her parents died. This vast openness was both frightening and exhilarating. "You ever worked on a ranch before?" Jack asked as the wagon rolled along the rutted road. "No," Catherine admitted. I can cook and sew and manage a household, but I have never tended animals or worked outdoors like this. You will learn, Jack said with confidence. Most of it is common sense and paying attention. Animals are not complicated, they just need food, water, and care. You treat them right, they will do well for you. Treat them poorly and you will have nothing but trouble. They talked as they traveled, Jack pointing out landmarks and telling her about the land. He had bought the ranch 2 years ago with money he had saved from years of cattle driving, taking herds up from Texas to Kansas along the Kishome Trail. It was dangerous work, he explained, with river crossings and storms and the constant risk of stampede, but it paid well for men willing to risk it. He had spent 5 years making those drives before he had enough to buy his own land. Why did you stop? Catherine asked. If the money was good. Jack was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the reins. I got tired of wandering, he said finally. Tired of sleeping on the ground and never having a place that was mine. My father was a drifter, never stayed anywhere long, and I grew up moving from place to place. I wanted something different, wanted to build something permanent. So I bought the ranch and settled down. It has been slow going alone, but I have made progress. The ranch came into view as the sun was lowering toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. It was modest, as Jack had said, but Catherine could see the care he had put into it. There was a small barn, a corral with good fencing, and 2 structures that looked like a cabin and a smaller outbuilding. A creek ran through the property, lined with cottonwood trees that provided shade and the sound of running water. That is the main cabin, Jack said, pointing. 2 rooms, wood stove, decent roof. I built the barn first, then the cabin. The small building is for storage and tools. He drove the wagon up to the cabin and helped Catherine down. Inside, the cabin was simple but clean. The main room had a wood stove, a table with 2 chairs, and a rocking chair near the fireplace. A doorway led to a small bedroom with a rope bed and a chest of drawers. The wooden floors were swept clean and gingham curtains hung at the windows. I will bring your things in, then I will get out of your way, Jack said. I will be in the barn if you need anything. We start early here, sun up. I will show you the routine tomorrow. Catherine watched him unload her few purchases and set them inside, then tip his hat and stride back toward the barn. She stood in the doorway of the cabin as twilight deepened, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the prairie, the chirping of crickets and the distant call of a night bird. For the first time since Richard had destroyed her life, she felt something that was not quite hope, but was at least the absence of despair. The next morning, Catherine woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and sunlight streaming through the window. She dressed quickly in her new work clothes, braided her dark hair, and stepped outside to find Jack already at work in the corral, training a young horse on a lead line. He saw her and waved, then finished what he was doing and came over to meet her. Morning, he said with an easy smile. Hope you slept well. Come on, I will show you around and teach you the routine. The next few hours were a crash course in ranch life. Jack showed her how to feed the chickens and collect eggs, how to milk the cow he kept for fresh dairy, how to check the horses for any injuries or problems. He explained about the cattle grazing in the far pasture and how they would need to ride out later to check on them. Catherine absorbed it all, asking questions when she did not understand, and Jack was patient with his explanations. You are catching on quick, he said approvingly as they worked together to muck out the horse stalls in the barn. It was hot, dirty work, but Catherine found she did not mind it. There was something satisfying about physical labor, about being able to see the results of her efforts immediately. Over the following weeks, Catherine settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose at dawn and worked until dusk, learning skills she had never imagined she would need. Jack taught her to ride, starting her on his gentlest mare and gradually building her confidence until she could ride out with him to check the herd. He showed her how to spot signs of illness in the cattle, how to repair fence line, how to read the weather in the clouds and the behavior of the animals. In return, Catherine took over the cooking and transformed the simple cabin into a real home. She planted a vegetable garden beside the house, started making butter and cheese from the cow's milk, and sewed curtains for the barn windows. In the evenings, after the work was done, they would sit on the porch of the cabin and talk as the stars came out overhead. Catherine learned that Jack was 30 years old and had never been married. He had come close once, he admitted, but the woman he had courted decided she did not want the uncertain life of a rancher's wife and married a banker instead. He had been hurt but had moved on, pouring his energy into building his ranch. "I figure the right person will come along when the time is right," he said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "No point in forcing something that is not meant to be." Catherine told him more about her own story too, about growing up in Philadelphia as the daughter of a shopkeeper, about losing her parents to cholera when she was 19, about meeting Richard Brennan at a church social and believing his promises of love and security. She described the slow realization that he was not the man he pretended to be, the mounting debts, the lies, and finally the devastating discovery that he had stolen everything and abandoned her. "I was such a fool," she said bitterly. "I believed every word he said. I thought he loved me." "You were not a fool," Jack said firmly. "He was a liar and a cheat. That is his failing, not yours. You trusted someone you had pledged your life to. That is what you are supposed to do in a marriage. He is the one who broke that trust." His words soothed something raw inside her, and as the weeks turned into months, Catherine found herself healing in ways she had not expected. The hard physical work tired her body but cleared her mind. The vast open spaces of the prairie gave her room to breathe after years of feeling trapped. And Jack's steady presence, his kindness without expectation of anything in return, slowly rebuilt her shattered faith in humanity. By late summer, Catherine realized she was happy. Not just content, but genuinely happy in a way she had never been, even in the early days of her marriage. She loved the work, loved the land, loved the feeling of building something with her own hands. And if she was honest with herself, she was developing feelings for Jack that went beyond gratitude or friendship. He was a good man in ways both large and small. He never raised his voice, never made her feel inferior or stupid when she made mistakes. He treated her as an equal partner in the ranch's work, valuing her opinions and contributions. When she successfully helped him deliver a calf from a cow having trouble, he praised her calm competence. When she baked her first successful loaf of sourdough bread, he ate 3 slices and declared it the best bread he had ever tasted. But more than that, he made her laugh. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, and he seemed to delight in drawing out her own wit. They developed an easy rapport, a rhythm of working together that felt natural and right. Sometimes she would catch him watching her as she worked in the garden or tended the horses, and the look in his eyes made her heart beat faster. She thought he might feel the same way about her, but he never said anything or made any advance. Catherine appreciated his respect for her situation. She was still legally married to Richard, even if she had no idea where he was or any desire to see him again. It was a complicated situation, and Jack seemed determined not to take advantage of it. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn color in the cottonwood leaves along the creek. Jack decided it was time to take some of his cattle to market in Abilene, and Catherine volunteered to help him drive them. They set out early one morning with 20 steers, moving them slowly along the road toward town. They were about halfway to Abilene when Catherine saw riders approaching from the south. There were 4 of them, and something about the way they rode made her uneasy. Beside her, Jack tensed in his saddle. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. "Let me do the talking." The riders pulled up in front of them, blocking the road. They were rough-looking men, the kind Catherine had learned to recognize in Abilene as drifters and troublemakers. The leader, a man with a scar across his cheek and cold eyes, looked them over with an unpleasant smile. "Nice cattle you got there," he said. "Where is your bill of sale?" "Right here," Jack said calmly, reaching into his saddlebag and pulling out the papers that proved his ownership of the animals. The scarred man glanced at the papers, then handed them back. "Looks in order. But there is a toll for using this road now. $20 and you can pass." "There is no toll on this road," Jack said, his voice still calm but with an edge to it now. "This is public land." "Not anymore," the man said, and his companions moved their hands closer to their guns. "So you can pay the toll or we can take the cattle as payment. Your choice." Catherine's heart hammered in her chest, but Jack did not look frightened, just coldly angry. "We are not paying you anything," he said, "and you are not taking our cattle, now move aside." The tension stretched out for a long moment, the only sounds the lowing of the cattle and the creak of saddle leather. Catherine could see Jack's hand resting on his thigh, inches from his gun. She held her breath, praying this would not turn violent. Then one of the other riders spoke up, his voice uncertain. "That is Jack Hollister, Clay. He rode for the Running W outfit. I heard about him. He is fast." The scarred man, Clay, studied Jack with narrowed eyes. Whatever he saw there made him reconsider. "Maybe we will let you pass this time," he said finally. "But you better be more neighborly next time we meet." He wheeled his horse around and rode off, his companions following. Jack waited until they were out of sight before letting out a slow breath. "You all right?" he asked Catherine. "I think so," she said, though her hands were shaking on the reins. "Would you really have drawn on them? There were 4 of them." "If it came to it, yes," Jack said. "But I was hoping it would not. Bullies like that usually back down if you stand up to them." They were looking for easy prey, and we were not it. They got the cattle to Abilene without further incident, and Jack got a good price for them. He insisted on giving Catherine a generous share of the profits. "You earned it," he said when she protested. "You worked as hard as I did raising those cattle and getting them to market. This is your money, Catherine. Save it, spend it, whatever you want. It is yours." Catherine looked at the bills in her hand, the first money she had truly earned herself, and felt a surge of pride. She had done this. Not Richard, not anyone else. She had worked hard and earned this through her own efforts. That night, back at the ranch, they celebrated with a special dinner that Catherine cooked. She had bought supplies in town, including a bottle of wine and ingredients for a proper cake. As they ate and talked by lamplight, Catherine felt a contentment so deep it almost frightened her. "Jack," she said suddenly, needing to speak before she lost her courage, "I want to thank you for everything. You saved my life that day in Abilene. I do not know what would have happened to me if you had not offered me this chance." Jack set down his fork and looked at her seriously. "You saved yourself, Catherine. I just offered you a job. You are the one who worked hard and learned everything and built a new life. That was all you." "We built it together," Catherine said softly. "This ranch, it feels like ours now, not just yours. I know that is not technically true, but it is how I feel. Like we are partners in this." "We are partners," Jack agreed. "Best decision I ever made, asking you to work with me. This place has become more than I ever imagined it could be, and that is because of you." They looked at each other across the table, and Catherine saw in his eyes everything she was feeling, all the emotions that had been building between them for months. She thought he might say something more, might finally speak the words she longed to hear, but instead he looked away and changed the subject. Catherine felt a stab of disappointment but understood. She was still married, still tied legally to a man who had betrayed her completely. Until that was resolved, Jack would not speak of love or a future together, no matter what he felt. He was too honorable for that. The next morning after breakfast, Catherine made a decision. "I need to go back to St. Louis," she told Jack. "I need to see a lawyer and start proceedings to end my marriage. It does not matter that Richard is gone. I need to be free of him legally." Jack nodded slowly. "I think that is wise. Do you want me to come with you?" Catherine shook her head. "No, you need to stay here with the ranch. But I would appreciate it if you could take me to Abilene to catch the stage. I will be back as soon as I can." "Take whatever time you need," Jack said. Your job will be here waiting for you, and Catherine, be careful. If Richard is still in St. Louis, he might cause trouble." "He won not," Catherine said with more confidence than she felt. "I am not the frightened woman I was 4 months ago. He has no power over me anymore." 3 days later, Catherine was back in St. Louis, walking into the office of a lawyer who had been recommended by the wife of Jack's banker in Abilene. The lawyer, a Mr. Pemberton, listened to her story and then delivered disappointing news. "You can seek a divorce, Mrs. Brennan, but it will be difficult and expensive," he explained. "Missouri law requires proof of adultery, abandonment for at least 1 year, or extreme cruelty. Your husband has only been gone 4 months. Unless you can prove adultery or cruelty, you will have to wait another 8 months before you can file on grounds of abandonment." Catherine felt her hopes deflate. 8 more months of being legally bound to Richard. "What about an annulment?" she asked. "He defrauded me. He took everything I owned." Mr. Pemberton shook his head. "Annulments are even harder to obtain. The courts do not generally recognize financial fraud as grounds for annulment. I am sorry, Mrs. Brennan. The law is not favorable to women in your situation." Catherine left the lawyer's office feeling defeated, but as she walked the streets of St. Louis, a different idea formed in her mind. She made her way to the courthouse and spent hours searching through public records. What she found made her heart race. Richard had not just disappeared. He had filed legal documents transferring all property to himself and then immediately mortgaging it and selling it. But in his haste, he had made mistakes. Some of the documents were improperly notarized. Others had dates that did not align with the timeline of events. It was sloppy work, the kind of errors that a good lawyer might be able to exploit. Catherine gathered copies of everything she found and brought them back to Mr. Pemberton. He studied the documents carefully, his expression growing more interested. "This might give us some options," he said slowly. "If we can prove fraud in the property transfers, we might be able to get some of your inheritance back. It would not end your marriage, but it would at least provide you with some financial restitution. And if your husband used forged or improperly executed documents, that is a criminal matter. The authorities would be interested in that." "Do it," Catherine said. "File whatever papers you need to file. I want him held accountable for what he did." "Over the next 2 weeks, Mr. Pemberton worked quickly, filing motions and alerting the authorities to the irregularities in Richard's documents. Catherine stayed in a modest boarding house, using her saved wages from the ranch to pay her expenses. She visited Mr. Pemberton's office daily for updates. Then came the breakthrough. Richard Brennan had been located in Chicago, where he was trying to sell the deed to Catherine's uncle's ranch in Texas using forged documents. When confronted by the authorities, he had confessed to multiple fraudulent schemes, including the theft of Catherine's inheritance. He was arrested and facing criminal charges. More importantly for Catherine's situation, Richard signed papers agreeing to a divorce with no contest. His lawyer advised him that cooperation would look better for him when his criminal case went to trial. Mr. Pemberton handled everything efficiently, and within 3 weeks of Catherine arriving in St. Louis, she had a court order granting her a divorce on grounds of fraud and abandonment, plus a judgment awarding her the value of her inherited property. "It is not everything you lost, Mr. Pemberton explained, but it is substantial. The court valued your uncle's ranch property at $8,000, which your husband must repay. Given that he is going to prison and has no assets, actually collecting that money may be difficult. However, the court has agreed to seize and liquidate any property he acquired with your money. So far, we have recovered about $3,000. $3,000. It was a fortune, more money than Catherine had ever possessed in her own name. Combined with what she had saved from her wages, she had real security for the first time in her life. But more than the money, she had her freedom. She was no longer Catherine Brennan. She had petitioned the court to restore her maiden name, and she was once again Catherine Hartley, answerable to no man and bound by no unwanted ties. She sent a telegram to Jack telling him the good news and that she was coming home. The words slipped out naturally, and as she handed the telegram to the operator, she realized that was exactly what the ranch in Kansas had become. Home. Not the place she had come from, but the place she belonged. The stagecoach journey back to Abilene felt longer than the trip to St. Louis, every mile an eternity. Catherine watched the landscape change outside the window, the buildings giving way to farmland and then to prairie, and felt anticipation building in her chest. She had practiced what she would say to Jack 100 times, but now that she was almost there, the words seemed inadequate. She arrived in Abilene on a bright October afternoon, the air crisp with autumn. Jack was waiting at the stage depot, his face breaking into a wide smile when he saw her step down from the coach. "Catherine," he said, moving forward to help her with her bag. Then he stopped, looking at her more closely. "Something is different. You look happy, really happy." "I am free," she said simply. "Divorced legally, and I got some of my inheritance back, not all of it, but enough. Richard is going to prison for what he did." Jack's smile widened. "That is wonderful. I am so glad for you, really glad." They stood there on the boardwalk, grinning at each other like fools, and Catherine realized she had to speak now or lose her courage entirely. "Jack, I need to tell you something," she said. "These past months working with you, living on the ranch, it has been the best time of my life. Better than anything I had before. And that is not just because you helped me when I needed it. It is because of you, the person you are. I have fallen in love with you, and I needed to say that, even if you do not feel the same way. You deserve to know." Jack's expression softened, and he reached out to take her hand, right there in the middle of the street where anyone could see. "Catherine, I have been in love with you since about the second week you were at the ranch. Watching you face every challenge head-on, learning and growing and never complaining. Seeing you smile, hearing you laugh. Every single day I had to remind myself not to say anything because you were married and it would not be right. But if you are telling me you are free now and that you feel the same way I do, then I have something to ask you." He kept hold of her hand, his eyes serious and full of emotion. "I know we have only known each other for 4 months. I know you just got out of a bad marriage and maybe need time before thinking about trying again. But I also know that life is uncertain and precious, and when you find something real, you should hold on to it. Catherine Hartley, would you consider marrying me? Not right away if you are not ready, but someday? Would you build a life with me as my partner and my wife?" Catherine felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, and I do not need time to think about it. I know what I want, and it is you. It is us. It is the life we have already started building together." Jack pulled her into his arms right there on the main street of Abilene and kissed her in full view of cowboys and shopkeepers and anyone else who cared to watch. Catherine kissed him back, pouring 4 months of longing and hope and love into that kiss, and did not care at all who saw them. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Abilene, with Jack's banker and his wife serving as witnesses. Catherine wore a new dress of deep blue silk that she had purchased with her own money, and Jack wore his best suit and a look of absolute happiness. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Jack kissed her with such tenderness that Catherine felt her heart might burst from joy. The ranch thrived under their joint care. With Catherine's money, they were able to buy more cattle and expand the herd. Jack built an addition onto the cabin, creating a larger bedroom and a proper dining room. Catherine continued to improve the garden and started selling her butter and eggs in Abilene, creating another revenue stream for the ranch. But more than the material growth, the ranch became a real home filled with love and laughter. Jack was everything Richard had not been: steady, honest, hardworking, and devoted. He consulted Catherine on every major decision and treated her as a full partner in all their endeavors. He never tried to control her or diminish her contributions. Instead, he celebrated her successes and supported her ambitions. In the spring of 1873, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She had been nervous about telling Jack, unsure how he would react, but he had lifted her off her feet and spun her around with delight. "A baby," he kept saying, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." Their son was born in December of that year, during a cold snap that frosted the windows and made the stove work overtime. Jack paced outside while the doctor and a midwife from Abilene attended Catherine. When he finally heard the baby cry, he burst into the room without waiting for permission. "Is she all right?" he asked frantically. "Is the baby all right?" "Both fine," the doctor assured him. "You have a healthy son, Mr. Hollister." Jack approached the bed slowly, his eyes fixed on the bundle in Catherine's arms. She pulled back the blanket so he could see their son's tiny red face, his eyes squeezed shut, and his mouth working as he made small sounds. "He is perfect," Jack whispered, reaching out a careful finger to touch the baby's cheek. "You are perfect. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for this gift." They named him James after Jack's uncle who had saved his family when Jack was a boy. Little James proved to be a healthy, happy baby who seemed to love the ranch as much as his parents did. Catherine would carry him in a sling as she did her chores, singing to him as she worked. Jack would hold him in the evenings, talking to him about the ranch and the cattle and all the things they would do together as James grew. The years flowed past like the creek that ran through their property, steady and life-giving. They added more children to their family, a daughter named Elizabeth in 1875, and another son named Michael in 1877. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, becoming known throughout the region for the quality of its cattle and the integrity of its owners. Jack built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, a proper two-story structure with a big kitchen and a parlor with a stone fireplace. Catherine furnished it with care, mixing practical ranch furnishings with a few beautiful pieces that she ordered from catalogs. It was nothing like the pretentious house she had shared with Richard in St. Louis, and she loved it 1,000 times more because it represented everything she and Jack had built together. In the evenings, after the children were in bed, Jack and Catherine would sit on their porch and watch the sunset, his arm around her shoulders and her head resting on his chest. They would talk about their day, make plans for the future, or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence, content in each other's presence. "You ever regret it?" Jack asked one evening in the summer of 1879. "Staying here, I mean. This is a hard life, especially for a woman who grew up in cities." "Do you ever wish you had gone somewhere else, tried something different?" Catherine lifted her head to look at him, surprised by the question. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. Jack, you gave me back my life when I thought it was over. You showed me what real partnership looks like, what real love looks like. This ranch, our family, this life we have built, it is everything I never knew I wanted. I am happier than I ever imagined I could be." Jack kissed her forehead, his lips lingering there. "I feel the same way. That day in Abilene when I met you, I thought I was just helping someone in trouble. I had no idea you would become my whole world." "My husband left me with nothing," Catherine quoted softly, remembering that desperate day 7 years ago. "That is what I told you." "And I told you to start over here with me," Jack finished, smiling at the memory. "Best thing I ever said." "Best thing I ever heard," Catherine agreed. As the years continued to pass, the Hollister Ranch became one of the most successful operations in the county. James grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did, while Elizabeth showed a gift for horses, and Michael demonstrated a head for the business side of cattle ranching. Jack and Catherine worked side by side through good years and bad, through droughts and plenty, through challenges and triumphs, their love deepening with every shared experience. In 1885, when Catherine turned 37 and Jack 43, they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together friends and neighbors from miles around. The house was filled with music and laughter, food and fellowship, as people gathered to celebrate a couple whose devotion to each other had become legendary in the community. Jack made a toast that evening, standing in their parlor with Catherine at his side and their 3 children watching. "To my wife," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "She came to Kansas with nothing but courage and determination, and she built a life that has blessed me beyond measure. Everything good in my world exists because she chose to take a chance on a cowboy with a small ranch and a big dream. Catherine, you are my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. Here is to the past 10 years and to 50 more." Everyone cheered and drank, but Catherine only had eyes for Jack. She saw in his face the same love and devotion she had seen that first day in Abilene when he had offered her hope and a new beginning. She saw their history written in the lines around his eyes and the gray beginning to show in his hair. She saw their future in the strength of his embrace and the warmth of his smile. "I love you," she whispered to him as the party continued around them. "More than words can express. You are my second chance, and I promise I will never take that for granted." "I love you too," Jack replied. "And you were mine. We saved each other, Catherine, and we will keep choosing each other every day for the rest of our lives." The party lasted late into the night, filled with stories and dancing and the kind of joy that comes from a life well lived and love well earned. When the last guests finally departed and the children were asleep, Jack and Catherine stood on their porch looking out at the ranch they had built together. The moon was full, painting everything in silver light. The cattle were settled in the pastures, the horses quiet in the barn, the creek running its eternal course through their land. Somewhere an owl called and another answered. The night air smelled of grass and earth and home. Catherine leaned into Jack's embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. She thought about the broken woman who had stepped off that stagecoach in Abilene, lost and alone with nothing to her name. She thought about the cowboy who had seen past her desperation to the person she could become. She thought about every moment that had led them to this place, standing together on their own land with their family sleeping safely inside. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For believing in me when I had stopped believing in myself. For building this beautiful life with me." Jack turned her in his arms so he could see her face in the moonlight. "Thank you for trusting me when you had every reason not to trust anyone. Thank you for your strength and your spirit and your love. Thank you for making my house a home and my life complete." He kissed her then, sweet and slow, a kiss that held all the promises they had made and kept, all the love they had shared and would share. When they finally pulled apart, Catherine was smiling. "Come on," she said, taking his hand. "Let us go inside. Tomorrow is another day of work and we will face it together like we always do." "Together," Jack agreed, following her into the house. "Always together." And as the door closed behind them and the lamps were extinguished one by one, the ranch settled into peaceful darkness, a testament to what could be built when 2 people chose love over fear, hope over despair, and partnership over everything else. The woman who had lost everything had found something far more valuable, a true home, a real partnership, and a love that would last all their days. The Hollister Ranch would continue to thrive for generations, passed down through the family that Jack and Catherine had created. Their children would tell their own children stories about the grandmother who had arrived in Kansas with nothing but determination, and the grandfather who had given her a chance to start over. Those children would grow up understanding that love was not just about romance, but about respect and partnership and the willingness to build something together from the ground up. But that was all future history, stories yet to be told. On this night in 1885, Jack and Catherine Hollister simply climbed the stairs to their bedroom in the house they had built with their own hands, lay down in the bed they shared, and fell asleep in each other's arms, content in the knowledge that they had found what so many people spent their whole lives searching for, a love worth fighting for, a partner worth trusting, and a home worth building. The woman who had once stood on a boardwalk in Abilene and said, my husband left me with nothing, had discovered that sometimes losing everything was just the beginning of finding what truly mattered. And the cowboy who had replied, "Then start over here with me," had learned that offering kindness to a stranger could lead to the greatest blessing of his life. Together, they had proven that new beginnings were always possible, that love could heal even the deepest wounds, and that the truest wealth was not measured in money or property but in the bonds of family, and the sharing of hearts joined in genuine partnership. As the years rolled on and they grew old together, working the ranch until they could no longer, then watching their children and grandchildren take over, Jack and Catherine never forgot where they had started. They never took for granted the miracle of having found each other. And they never stopped being grateful for that hot June day in 1872, when two lost souls had met in a cattle town in Kansas, and had decided, against all odds and despite all obstacles, to build a life together that would stand as a testament to the enduring power of second chances and true love.